Right. So all of you look quite chirpy and bright. That's because you're at home. Poor Naveen, who's traveled here in the heat, although in his car, he's already yawning. Anushree is not yawning. But yeah, all of you look pretty good. So please, I hope you stay that way. I hope you are cool and ready for a session. We'll probably finish well, today we can go a bit over 8. Tomorrow, being Tuesday, we'll do more mantras, plus some of and a verse, not just mantra, but we are reciting mantras for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and our teacher Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So that session will be mainly tomorrow. And today we will work with these verses. But of course, we will dedicate anything that we do, all our practices, to also create causes for the long life of our teachers. That's very important to dedicate for that. Yeah. So we'll start very soon. Some more people, 2 more people have arrived here. So probably, maybe you want to come to one side? Do you mind? Yeah. When more people come, they can. It's nice to have some space in the middle. Yeah. Also, I can keep an eye on Naveen and make sure he doesn't fall asleep. Yeah. You might need this cushion to give support to your back. Because your posture is not good. Posture should be upright. That will help you, especially given what you told me. So your posture is good to be upright. For that, you might see later that you need some support for your back. Check it out. Yeah. You need something? Okay. So thank you everybody for being here. The 8 people, 9 people online, and the people here at Tushita. I'm going to mute all of you online because sometimes there are extraneous noises. Yeah, and we're recording this, so can be mindful of that. Okay. So please pay attention to your posture. It's very important. Since we have a body and a mind, we are not bodiless beings, and the body is intimately connected, especially at our level with the mind. So please sit upright. If you can, unless you have some problem with that. And then let your shoulders be level, your head tilted slightly forwards. Arms relaxed by the side of the body, allowing air to circulate between your torso and your arms, and your hands relaxed in your lap or on your thighs. Let the muscles in the face be soft, not tight. So check for tension around the jaw and the eyes. And let there be a softness in the face. Softness you might see in a beautiful painting, the softness you see in some paintings of the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, or in the face of a sleeping person or child, a relaxed child. Often children have maybe more relaxation in their faces than adults who have accumulated a lot of frowning and worrying. So our faces resemble parched landscapes where rain hasn't fallen for a long time. But anyway, just let there be a softness in the face, a gentleness, as though there's a kind of an inner smile emerging in the face. Okay. So remember the overall sense of stillness, a sense of being relaxed, at ease, not pushing, we're not competing or examining ourselves, and we're not undergoing, an examination in that sense, so we can relax. But also naturally attentive, awake. And by way of a short motivation today, we can just remember how countless beings, humans and animals, are rushing around, being very busy, trying to be happy, trying to gain pleasure and happiness, rushing around, doing all manner of things, being very busy, and engaging in all kinds of actions, many of them unwholesome, or repetitive at least, and pretty useless, some of them, which are not helping them develop lasting happiness at all. And many of those actions are only going to be the cause for those beings to suffer more and more in the future due to the power of cause and effect, not due to any punishment from any kind of external deity or force, but due to the laws of cause and effect. So beings desperately wanting happiness, forever creating causes of suffering, the opposite of what they want. Seeing this situation, how can one not be sad? How can one not feel, not only for oneself, because oneself is also doing this, if we are honest, at least part of the time. So we feel sad for ourselves, we feel tremendously sad for others. And although we appreciate the beauty and somehow the majesty or whatever of the natural world, the animal world, we see there also how it is basically kill or be killed, for many of those animals. And how that life is also has so many difficulties, dangers, suffering. And especially those animals also who are being brought up just to be food for humans. Appalling conditions of those countless animals, fish, beings. So seeing that, being aware of that, feeling a sense of gratitude for the opportunity we have to calm and clear and develop kindness, wisdom that will help us long term. How wonderful that is. None of this will be easy, but the fact that we have the potential to develop these qualities is something extraordinary and to be grateful for. So please spend a little while on this, which is our motivation for practice. In other words, we practice so that we may be of some benefit to suffering beings, even if it's to a very few. Okay, so we'll sit together quietly for a little while. being mindful of the breath, recognizing when extraneous thoughts arise, recognizing, gently letting go, not getting involved with the content of the thoughts, not getting caught up in the fascination with past, future, just coming back to the breath again and again. Sensation of breath. Sensation of breath at nostrils or the rising and falling of the abdomen. And allowing the out breath to be a medium of letting go and relaxing. If you need to stand or stretch briefly, please do that. And yeah, please do keep your mobiles on silent if you don't mind. Job consideration for everybody. Bob, is your phone on silent?
Tushita.
Good.
Tushita.
Thank you. Even the vibration mode is disturbing sometimes. Don't look so serious. It's okay. Smile in a while. Every 2 minutes you should smile, I think. It helps. We can get very serious. Okay, thank you everyone who's online. 14 of you, and there are 6 of us here at Tushita, 7 including myself. So hopefully there'll be some benefit in taking a look at the 8 verses. Did you didn't? Anyway, did you bring your copies? Okay, take a copy. Okay. Yeah. So here we have to remember we're dealing with a text that is of what we call the great scope, or the highest, one of the highest levels of the teachings, you could say, the Mahayana level of teaching, which means that we shouldn't feel dismayed if we think, oh, I cannot practice this yet. This is not something simple. Even the simple part, the simple scope, so-called, of the path. There are 3 scopes. One way of dividing the path is into 3 scopes, or 3 levels of training. One is where we are primarily aiming to create the causes for happiness in a future life, in future lives, realizing that this one life is very short, nothing compared to the extent of future lives. So that's traditionally the first scope, which means that traditionally speaking, we are not even considered authentic spiritual practitioners if we are not at least aiming long term. If we're just thinking of the happiness of this life, then that is not considered, that's good, of course, but then everyone wants happiness in this life. Who doesn't? That's nothing very special, although it's unusual, of course, to find it. But just to search for happiness in this life is considered traditionally worldly and not authentic spiritual practice, because spiritual practice is concerned with reality, and according to those who say they know, and logically also it could be looked at in many ways, according to the Buddhist teachings, there is no end to consciousness. There's been no beginning and there's no end. So we have to make sure the future is something positive and happy. So anyway, that's the first scope, to create causes in this life of ethical qualities, and to behave in a way that makes sure that we have this good human kind of opportunity in the future where we can create causes for happiness. You have logged in from another device. Your polling session is inactive. What does that mean?
That's just me. I'm just going to share the verses from my screen.
Okay. Thank you. That is our controller upstairs. Okay, so that's the first scope. The second scope is, say, okay, so I have happiness in a future life, great. But am I creating causes for actual liberation from the deepest roots of suffering? Am I really cutting the root of suffering? No. To do that, we have to uproot ignorance. The very root of samsara is ignorance, not understanding who we are, and on that basis creating confusion and negativity. On the basis of ignorance, acting out of aversion and attachment and jealousy and pride and so forth. So are we uprooting that? To do that, we have to practice ethics, concentration, wisdom, especially the wisdom side of the path. So that's the second scope, where we realize to uproot the cause of suffering and attain liberation from suffering forever, we need to engage wholeheartedly in the 3 higher trainings: ethical conduct, developing a very focused, concentrated mind, so that we can then deeply analyze and understand wisdom, how things actually exist. So that is quite a task. That's the medium scope, okay? We spoke first of the small scope. This is the medium scope only. The great scope is where we aim not only for our own liberation, but for the liberation of others. The Bodhisattva path. This is what we're talking about in these 8 verses, primarily. So don't be dismayed if you find it tricky, difficult, hard work. Of course, this is a very high level of practice, but it's not something that we have absolutely no experience of, because we've all had a moment of kindness or love or compassion. So we're not talking about something totally outside of our experience. I mean, not completely. We have a link somewhere. We have a softness within us which helps us link up with some of these teachings. But you see, even the first level of the path, the small scope, is not easy, right? To create causes for lasting happiness by practicing restraint, restraining ourselves from negative actions, harming others in all ways, doing that. And, that is not easy. To practice generosity, to practice those things that will help give us another good human existence where we can continue to practice. Creating those causes and conditions is not easy. So even that. And then, of course, really understanding our ignorance, going into that deeply on the basis of a calm, collected, very focused mind, based in itself on a restrained, ethical, good way of life, which is the medium scope. That's not easy, obviously. Who has the discipline, the time and the discipline and the motivation to do all that, So then you might ask, why are we looking at these teachings, which are from the great scope, from the a person of a very high capacity? Well, because a lot of it resonates, and because we can use some of these teachings right now. We can begin to do that. And all of the verses have something which is very practical and useful for us right now in our life. We don't have to already feel we have mastered the small and the medium scopes. Yeah. So something? Huh? Insect. Okay. So view it compassionately. See it as superior. Yeah. Okay. So we've looked at the first 2 verses, the first 3 verses even, although there's so much to say. The last verse we looked at was that in all my deeds, may I probe into my mind. As soon as mental and emotional afflictions arise, as they endanger myself and others, may I strongly confront them and avert them. This is very difficult because we are trained and we've become used to, and our life almost not forces us, but encourages us to look outwards. And what do we see when we look outwards? We see other people and we see all their mistakes, don't we? Especially if we're certain kind of people. I mean, if you're a politician, then you're trained to see other people's mistakes so you can attack them, right? Almost as though you're training yourself not to see your own mistakes or to hide your own mistakes, But let's not get at politicians. We are all little politicians in our own way, sometimes probably. So we are looking outwards. Our 5 senses draw us outwards, don't they? All the time. So the eye consciousness. Think how powerful that is, your eye consciousness, how you're constantly going out and judging and, reflecting on what is outside, and then, of course, listening and smelling and so forth, tasting, touching. Outside, we're not going inwards to see, what is the state of what we call the mind, what we call the mental consciousness. What's going on inside? We're not used to probing inside, usually. We're used to probing outside. Would you agree? Largely. A lot of our energy is involved with that. A lot of it, looking outwards. So that you get very strange and even hilarious situations where people are accusing each other of things that they themselves are suffering from. You know, you're accusing the other person of being angry and selfish and so on and so forth, whereas that is something totally that oneself is also involved with. But one is not seeing our own, one is only seeing the other person's negativity. We're not really that conscious of our own. Or we're little conscious, but we're very good at self-deception and denial, so we deny that we have those tricky, unfavorable, whatever qualities. We'd rather see them and attack them on the outside, right? We'd like to attack them on the outside, which is why it's great fun and gives people a tremendous amount of energy being certain kind of oppositionists or activists or people like that. We like to find the mistakes and point out how other people are wrong and what they need to get right. But we're not. It's amazing. Even when I look at my own case, how much one often avoids looking at one's own shortcomings. So much more, almost reassuring to see other people's mistakes. And then, of course, you can talk about them with other people, with your friends. You can talk about other people's mistakes, can't you? It's a good conversation piece. It can keep you occupied for hours talking about it. So this is just to say how much we are outward oriented, and the only time we're not is perhaps when we're asleep, and then you have all these dreams, possibly, some of which we may remember. So to actually observe when a mental affliction is arising, this is not easy. Because we're not talking about full-blown anger, full-blown lust or jealousy or pride. That's pretty easy to notice. But how about when it's beginning to arise? How about when it's beginning to flicker into life? One teacher has spoken about the power of what he calls flickering thoughts. Thoughts come and go often, quite rapidly. Have you noticed sometimes how you're having a few little thoughts, and before long, they can build up into something quite powerful, like an emotion, a strong feeling of various kinds, often unwholesome, attachment, anger, irritation, doubt, tremendous doubt, anxiety, fear, envy, even hatred. But it starts small. It's, of course, sometimes it comes out very strongly, quickly, depending on the person, but often you can just start with a few thoughts, some flickers of thoughts and images and memories. And before you know it, you are full-fledged into quite a strong emotion of attachment or anger, which is taking over your mind. It's taken over your mind temporarily. Luckily, of course, for us, this is not the nature, this is not the deep nature of our mind, right? What's the deep nature of our mind? It's a revision for people who have heard so many Zoom talks for the last 2 years. I've spoken about this. If anger and attachment and so forth and jealousy are temporary, then what is the deeper nature of my mind and your mind?
Love and compassion.
Huh?
Compassion and love.
Okay. Compassion and love, says Navinji. Okay. But what else? Okay. Yes. What else? Any participants? Hold on a sec. I'll just allow the Zoomers to at least, yeah. What are you saying? What do you mean by Buddha nature?
So, which is characterized by love and compassion and wisdom.
Yeah. So Buddha nature, yeah, we would say this deepest pristine awareness, Buddha nature, which is the Some say the potential for enlightenment, some say the emptiness of the mind. But we could say in general that our Buddha nature is characterized by, to use very basic language, that we have these qualities, the seed at least of these qualities of openness, intelligence, warmth or love. These qualities are there in the mind, naturally. And that the other factors like anger and attachment are temporary. They come about later. This is what is being said in the teaching. So in that sense, we don't need to become upset or depressed when we see mental and emotional afflictions arise. But we do need to be ready for them. It's like saying, okay, I have a guard outside my house. I know that most people are not wanting to come and rob my house. It's like, most people are pretty much okay. But a few people, 1 in 100,000 or 1 million, may be such that they would like to, come and steal something. So of course, it's like the good people far outnumber the people who have wrong intentions in that example. So this is just a very bad example to show that these negative emotions are temporary, they're not lasting. What is a deep, abiding nature is the Buddha nature, which is this warmth, spontaneity, openness, clarity, wisdom. Many, many things could be said. Obviously, whole books written about Buddha nature. Lord Maitreya and Asanga's text teaching on it, the Uttara Tantra is on the Buddha nature. All these things are there to be read and studied if one is very interested. So the reason we want to probe into our mind is because these afflictions, whatever they are, however temporary they may be, they may arise from flickering thoughts and be temporary, but as the third line says, they endanger myself and others. They really do. If I get involved with them again and again, they lead to deep habit patterns in the mind. Even if I never open my mouth and say something nasty, or even if I never use my body to harm somebody, just having harmful thoughts leads to very powerfully negative predisposition in the mind and leads to future suffering. So don't think you have to shout at someone or hit them or do something physical with your words or your body in order to create very, very, very unwholesome karma. No, you just need to have certain kind of thoughts again and again and not recognize them as just fleeting thoughts, to identify with them and to keep on repeating them. So that in itself is negative. As we know, who wants to go around having jealous thoughts all the time? How painful it is. What a dreadful habit it builds up, We don't need to say or do anything. Just having those thoughts is painful and creates mental karma. Mental karma is the main one. Verbal and physical follow later. They follow the mind. Yeah. So that's why this text says, may I strongly confront them and avert them. May I strongly confront them and avert them. Yeah, we read it from Dalai Lama Ji on this yesterday. Sometimes he said you have to be careful not to take them too lightly. You might think, oh, they're not very intense, so maybe this one's okay, and treat them casually. But he says, the problem is the longer you are accustomed to these afflictions within you, the more prone you become to their reoccurring, and then the greater will be your propensity, your habit to give in to them. So this you can check if that is the case. But yeah, if you keep on thinking about those pastries, those sweets in the shop, the more you think about it, the more you will be then likely to actually go in and buy them and eat them, even if your doctor has told you to avoid them. But if you keep on thinking about them, just have some flickering thoughts, it can really be very distracting. You may have somewhere something to do. You may have planned to go somewhere, but then you have this thought coming up, oh, I haven't had barfi or whatever, gajar halwa for a long time. And that really kind of hooks into one. It hooks you. It's hard to let go of it. So then you kind of have a stage where, oh, should I get in the scooter rickshaw and just go where I'm supposed to go? I'm supposed to do that. But then you are having this thought, and the sweet shop is right next door. So then very often, due to the propensity, we will just follow the habit and go in and take those sweets. So we shouldn't think that is a small thing. Oh, it's not a big deal, we haven't harmed anyone. But, we are giving into attachment. We're giving into that wanting in the mind, which in this case, the doctor has also said it's harmful for you. It's harmful for you, he meant physically, but we know that it's also harmful mentally. It creates this habit pattern of wanting and giving into, our wants all the time. So we shouldn't take it lightly. So the verse suggests we should be aware of this fact so that we remain alert. Because if we, if we see the facts, we are often driven. We are driven by these negative tendencies. And we can certainly see sometimes how that is the case with us. Sometimes it's easier to see how it's operating in other people. But it's also operating in us. We can be driven sometimes by, for example, this I think is quite common. If someone has hurt you in some way or slighted you or said something not very nice about you, especially in public, then the part of the mind sometimes really is looking for that occasion where you can do it, give it back, do it to them. You can punish them. You can, what they did to you, you want to do to them. You want to get your revenge through words in a similar way. So you're looking for that opportunity. You can spend so much of your mind is then focused on that. Or if you look at, the larger question of revenge, this is just to take one example of negative tendency. In some cultures, it's considered manly or the right thing to do to take revenge. If someone has hurt one of your family, especially if they killed them, you have to go and kill one of them. You can spend a lot of time planning and then executing that action. Imagine the negativity created there. All those mind moments driven by anger and attachment to getting that result, killing somebody because they killed one of you or whatever. Or someone says something to you, so it affects you so badly, then you decide not to talk to that person again. And you may not talk to that person ever again sometimes, or for years. Think of that negativity. The mindset you have when you think of that person, the fact that you're not going to talk to that person, is building up this huge amount of unwholesomeness. And according to Buddhist teachings, we shouldn't think it doesn't have a result in this and in the future. This and future lives, I mean. Buddhism is saying this. This is why one of my friends, he said to me, he was a slightly older friend who's done a lot of retreats, meditation with our teacher. He said, Buddhism is brutal in that sense. Buddhism is brutal. You can water it down, like people like to say, oh, it's about feeling good, and you just take what you like, and so that you feel a bit better. But it's brutal in the sense that it does speak about certain facts. That we're humans, but we're not going to be necessarily humans forever. It depends how we behave. We can be reborn as something else. It speaks about karma and its results. It speaks about the terrifying nature of samsara, where there is a perpetual kind of dissatisfaction of one kind and another, unless we are skillful in following an authentic path. In that sense, Buddhism is brutal. If we don't create causes for happiness, then we will not have happiness. doesn't drop out of the sky. God doesn't give us happiness or Buddha because they like us or something, or we're the chosen ones. So this is kind of brutal, but we can protect ourselves by, behaving skillfully. You understand what I'm saying here by saying, Buddhism is brutal. Of course, Buddhism is also about kindness, being kind to yourself, but the reason to be kind to oneself is because reality, if you like, is brutal. It's not that Buddhism is really brutal, but Buddhism understands, I think, how things are, and that is brutal. Brutal to those of us who are happy to be careless and not bother about consequences of actions, who are quite content to go around with negative mind or harming others, or lying, or whatever it is. So in that sense, there's a brutality. There is no escape from consequences unless we purify very strongly. And that also is kind of brutal because it's hard work. So anyway, I don't want to put you off. I don't want the Tushita numbers to decline. But in that sense, we must strongly confront and avert these emotional afflictions. That's the main task of the path, is to get rid of that which is the cause of suffering, right? Four Noble Truths of the Buddha, suffering, cause of suffering, ending of suffering, path leading to ending of suffering. So the second truth is cause of suffering. Cause of suffering is just this, the mental afflictions, negative emotions, and karma. We have to be aware of these things. We have to confront them, not just treat them, very casually. And of course, if we are compassionate people, we have to protect other people's minds by helping them not be overtaken by negative emotions. That's why it's often good to be kind and very compassionate to people who are basically angry people, because we don't see any reason, there's no good reason to inflame them. They're already creating enough negativity. We have to pacify. We have to help pacify the situation. Help people create causes for their future peace and happiness. So anyway, this is very basic, but so important, this verse. And so difficult, because we just get carried away by habits, remember? Habits, the partner of the ego, or the distracted nature of who we are. These habits are so strong because they've been built up, some of them over beginningless time. And just in this life, we see how certain habits become so strong. And we're talking here of unwholesome habits that are not helpful for us or others. So we have to confront them. And this includes things like anxiety, fear, worry. We can't just let them run riot and rule our lives and say, well, I'm not harming anyone with my worry or my anxiety. Well, you're harming yourself, and you're preventing yourself developing your own creative potential by wasting mental energy on these things. So they should also be worked with, understood, confronted. We can't just let ourselves be ruled by these things. Or however difficult that is, we must try to work with them, understand them. Next verse. Sorry? How does one confront anxieties? Well, that's a very big question. If you have an overall practice of meditation, it can help, because then we begin perhaps to not take seriously everything that is arising in the mind. Well, by that I mean we don't react to it as, oh, that's awful, or this is terrible. Something comes like a dark cloud in the sky, and then it goes. We let it go. We don't fixate on it and say, oh, and get upset or afraid or angry or lustful. We just see it as something arising and passing away. But of course, we identify with things, with anxiety, and so it becomes more powerful, and we anxiety is usually often accompanied by anxious thoughts. So the more we perpetuate the thoughts, the more the anxiety will carry on, right? But if we can stop thinking so much all the time, you can just be watching or with the breath, then that can help can help. But then there should be a whole life sort of, what shall I say, a whole way of living our life where we, for example, take proper exercise. We go out a little bit. We enjoy nature. We don't just stay in our rooms, thinking dark thoughts or lying in bed, which is easy to do when we are a little bit depressed or anxious. You just want to lie down and try and sleep, or just distract oneself with Netflix or something. So yeah, that's why it's not easy work, but we have to begin by watching and not taking what's arising in our mind too seriously, working with the breath, relaxing with the out breath. This will only make sense when we do it more. Thinking about it will not help that much. Thinking is one of our main problems. Wrong thinking. I mean, creative, positive, intelligent thinking is, of course, something wonderful. But a lot of our thinking is muddled, confused, anxious, fearful, etc., etc. Repetitive, of course, also. So, yeah, slowly we have to work on these things. There's no formula to, I think, get rid of anxiety immediately. Of course, another thing to think about is the things in general is when we're anxious, we're usually looking at something in the future which could happen, or. So to think about the good things that are happening for you, what should you be grateful for? Well, perhaps you could be grateful, just simple, the fact that your hands and feet are working. Think about people whose hands and feet don't work because of sickness or old age or some birth defect. Think of people who can't see anything. Think of people who can't hear. It's not easy, is it? Because we're so preoccupied with our own stuff. We can't even begin to think about what other people are going through. How about, what do we like to be blind? You're not blind, you're not deaf. You don't have, any big mental defect that you can't understand things or what I'm saying. Your heart is working, probably your liver and kidneys are not too bad, you're still operating, right? You're still working, yeah? Your body works. Amazing. I was just talking on the lawn with our landlady before the session, and she's over 80. She's just so grateful for the fact that she can still walk and has energy, Yeah. Are you coming back? You're not going away. You're not disappearing. Good. Good. Actually, Bob, could you bring me some hot water, Bob? Bob, do you mind, sir? Bob is very good. Huh? Cup, yeah. Thanks. So,
not getting hotter every day, 42, 3-4 days. Let's hope it rains.
Thank you.
It's getting very hot during daytime.
So, okay. So now, next verse. This is very powerful. When I see beings of unpleasant character, oppressed by strong negativity and suffering, may I hold them dear, for they are rare to find, as if I have discovered a jewel treasure. Wow. When I see beings of unpleasant character, unpleasant to me, they seem to be oppressed. But look at the language there. They're not saying unpleasant character who have strong negativity. The words there, oppressed by strong negativity and suffering, already are pointing us in a direction where we are, understanding that these people are people not just to, be gotten angry about, but they are oppressed. They're like slaves. This is just one thing I'm noticing with the language. They are oppressed by strong negativity. They are the slave of their negativity, of their negative emotions. And they are suffering. They are oppressed by strong negativity and suffering. They're unpleasant. Yeah, we don't like them. So it could possibly be we don't like them because of what they look like or how they behave, what they've done to us, or people we love or know, or their opinions we are, think are dreadful. So they are unpleasant to us, but we're also calling them oppressed. And they're suffering. Of course, they're suffering because they're in samsara, but they are strongly suffering because they have this negativity, strong negativity. So if you have strong negativity from a Buddhist point of view, you have strong suffering right now and later as a result of that negativity, right? So already in those first two lines, we are being pointed in a certain direction, aren't we? But we don't just see them as people to be brushed aside, hated, looked down on, avoided at all costs, isn't it? Because let's face it, if there are unpleasant people around, we don't want to be near them. We don't want to have anything to do with them. And often we just develop a lot of negative thoughts towards them, depending on how unpleasant they appear to us. And then when we get home or wherever, we talk about them to people. Oh, saw this really unpleasant person, they were talking so rudely, or they were doing this or that, or whatever. They were so unpleasant, totally neglecting the fact that, like us, that being is just being used, is the slave temporarily of negative emotion, of anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, miserliness, whatever it is we don't like about that unpleasant person, right? Does that make sense? Question from Naveen?
Still trying to understand the text. The question I have to myself is, why do we hold them dear? Because they are rare to find.
I haven't come to that yet. I'm only looking at the first two lines. I'm coming to that. Yeah. So he's saying about the last two lines, Naveen ji is asking a question. I said, please wait, we're coming to that. Yeah. So these first two lines are very interesting and very powerful because they're introducing us to this, to an unpleasant being. And so we could think of someone right now whom we don't like at all. That might be quite useful, although not easy, but quite useful, because this is supposed to be practical. This is not theory, It's not a theoretical text. This is how to put compassion into practice, wisdom and compassion. So then it says, may I hold them dear, for they are rare to find, as if I've discovered a jewel treasure. Let's look at the last line first. They're saying that this person is like a treasure, this person who is unpleasant, oppressed by strong negativity and suffering. They're a jewel treasure. So why? Why? I mean, there are lots of people in the world oppressed by strong negativity and suffering. But here it's saying, the third line, may I hold them dear, for they are rare to find. So perhaps this means that, this is a big opportunity for me. I'm not going to find, I may find lots of unpleasant people if I think about them in the world, whom I could think about. But how many unpleasant people are actually giving me a hard time? How many really unpleasant people are giving me a hard time? And therefore, an opportunity to practice patience and all these other qualities. How many of such people are there? Now, if I think about it in my life right now, I can't think of anyone who is giving me this opportunity. A really unpleasant person who is causing me big problems right now. I can't find anyone in my life right now. So therefore, I don't have I have lots of other opportunities for patience, I think, connected with my work, but not with unpleasant people. That would be a real challenge. To have someone who is trying to cheat me, or has taken me to court for for a fallacious reason, or who is trying to, one way or another, rob me of my property or something, whatever. This person I don't have in my life right now, which from the point of view of this text is a pity, you know. They're kind of feeling sorry for me. I don't have such a person in my life. If I did, I would know that I've discovered a jewel treasure. Such people are rare to find. Now you really found the person who you can practice patience and compassion with. The rest was just theoretical. You felt so good that you thought you were such a kind person and so kind to people. But you couldn't really practice compassion or patience because you didn't have this rare person who is really unpleasant, really gives you a hard time. You know, let's see what Dalai Lama ji says about this verse before we. This verse, excuse me, I wish this was very hot water, but it's not. There I am blaming the water. This verse refers to the special case of relating to people who are socially marginalized, perhaps because of their behavior, their appearance, their destitution, or on account of some illness, where whoever practices this bodhicitta, or great compassion and all, must take special care of these people, as if on meeting them you have found a real treasure. Instead of feeling repulsed, a true practitioner of these altruistic principles should engage and take on the challenge of relating. In fact, the way we interact with people of this kind could give a great impetus to our spiritual practice. In this context, I'd like to point out the great example set by many Christian brothers and sisters who engage in the humanitarian and caring professions, especially directed to marginalized members of society. One such example is, in our times, was the late Mother Teresa, who dedicated her life to caring for the destitute. She exemplified the ideal that is described in this verse. Interesting, His Holiness is mentioning this. Of course, they are oppressed by suffering, strong negativity from a Buddhist point of view, because they've created the causes of that suffering. So you could say that. And unpleasant in the sense that, yes, who wants to look after a very old body that is also not so nice to look at, also maybe smelly, hasn't washed in weeks because they've been picked up off the street, maybe doing caca in their clothes, you know, who wants to pick up and look after and cherish such a person? So in that sense, they're unpleasant. Not that they've harmed us, but it's the same way that, you know, we go past a dustbin when we go like this, it's kind of unpleasant. So in that sense, very interesting. His Holiness brings out this kind of example. I think it's very, very good to bring out. He also says, I often point out to them that it's not sufficient for a Buddhist center simply to have programs of teaching or meditation. Of course, there are many very impressive centers, but I also emphasize to them the need to bring the social and caring dimension into their program of activities so that the principles presented in the Buddhist teachings can make a contribution to society. I also heard of Buddhist centers involved in giving some form of spiritual education in prisons, where they give talks and offer counseling. I think these are great examples. I feel it's, of course, deeply unfortunate when such people, particularly prisoners, feel rejected by society. Not only is it deeply painful for them, but also from a broader point of view, it is a loss for society. We are not providing the opportunity for these people to make a constructive social contribution when they actually have the potential to do so. Interesting. So that's that's a good angle on that His Holiness has brought out. But there are very few people, I guess. Even I think a lot of doctors and nurses, they have to deal with unpleasant situations. In that sense, unpleasant characters. You know, someone comes in half, you know, bloody looking and their body torn up in an accident. That's unpleasant, right? You could say also that's an unpleasant character and they're suffering. But, you know, doctors and nurses take care of these people. often help them, stay alive, get well. Excuse me. So, yeah, may I hold them dear. They are rare to find. Some people, yeah, I mean, a lot of people, you could see how they don't spend time with people who are disadvantaged. Most of us, we don't spend time with people who are suffering much, usually. Certainly not with people who are marginalized or who don't have the same standards of clothing and cleanliness that we have. We don't like to be with such people, even for a second, How many people go and talk to their kabadiwalas, not kabadiwala, kudewalas, the people who come and arrange the garbage in certain parts of the locality, so sorting it out, getting it ready. Many of them, of course, are unwashed and very decrepit looking, aren't having underarm, deodorants and so forth. How many of us even, think about them much?
Most hardworking people.
They're so hardworking, yeah. It's so hardworking.
Most hardworking.
At least the ones
Scavengers.
who come near my house, very hardworking. So, it's not as though there aren't many such people around. There are, but when we notice them, for us it's like finding a treasure, because this person or these persons in front of us are giving us a chance to open our hearts, open our minds to something, that we don't usually do. Yeah, helping us to expand you could say the circle of our awareness and care. And not just to people who look good, smell good, are the same as us in many ways, and share our values and jobs, and go around in, the same kind of vehicles and so forth. No, we're willing to work with, or at least feel soft and kind-hearted towards people who at first we find unpleasant for whatever reason. So here His Holiness does not at all mention the aspect of someone who is really harming you or being nasty to you, but just people who are suffering a lot. And of course, if someone is suffering a lot, from a Buddhist perspective, it is because of unwholesomeness, because of past negative karma. So in that sense, they have been oppressed by strong negativity. Yeah, did you have a question? No, yeah? No, okay. Haji.
The point that you just said, that was my doubt actually. The Dalai Lama did not talk about an irritating person, rather a person who is maybe having leprosy or
whatever, yeah.
living on the streets. So does this verse also refer to a person who is irritating?
Obviously, I think so. Yes, although the next verse is also connected with that. But yes, I think this verse is a very wide application. And this was a very short commentary by the Dalai Lama. He obviously can't bring out every aspect of every verse, every time he teaches on it.
Prisoners can be negative people
in another way. But here it's just mentioning the fact that who wants to go to a prison anyway? We look at a prison, we say, oh, no, let's go to the sweet shop or to the mall. Who wants to go into prison to talk to prisoners? Very few people, unless you're a lawyer. And then you have other motives. Yeah, so that's the point, that we are willing to go into situations where there is unpleasantness, not just people who are being nasty to us, but it also applies there. Next verse, when others, this is powerful. When others, out of jealousy, treat me wrongly with abuse, slander, scorn, may I take upon myself the defeat and offer to others the victory. This apparently is a verse which traditionally they said made one Lama very, very, very curious about these teachings when he read it. And then he went on to get more teachings, and then he himself created thought transformation tradition or text, I think. So what does it mean here? First two lines are easy. They're just telling us that, what happens. So, but when people do that, they treat me wrongly. Out of jealousy, or it could be something else, but let's say out of jealousy, that's what it's saying here. They treat me badly, they abuse me, slander. And remember, this could be in public as well, not just something they do quietly over WhatsApp or something like that. It could be something far more powerful than that. Yeah. So then what do we do? Here it says we offer the victory to others and we take on the suffering oneself. Take the defeat oneself. Again, we have to look at this very carefully. I could read something else first just to give some background to this, into all of these verses from the 37 practices that I looked at earlier. Even if someone for whom I've cared for as dearly as my own child perceives me as an enemy, it is a practice of bodhisattvas to love this person devotedly, just as a mother loves her child who is stricken by disease. So all of us, all beings are stricken by the disease of the negative emotions. So it is quite natural for beings to not treat us properly. As we mentioned last time, they are diseased, they have mental disease. So this is not at all unusual. We have to be ready for that, and we have to treat them kindly. Okay, there are some very powerful verses here which talk about the Bodhisattva attitude, which is based on the fact that if I only work for my own happiness out of self-cherishing, I will not find happiness. And that, as we mentioned before, real happiness starts when we cherish other people, not just ourselves. So therefore, we have quotations such as, even if someone, and this relates to this verse we're looking at, even if someone, amid a crowd of many people, reveals one's faults and utters harsh words, it is the practice of the bodhisattvas to bow to that person respectfully, with the notion that this is one's spiritual teacher. There are many things here. This is so much to look at here. There's the, I take upon myself to defeat and offer others a victory because I realize that if I always want the victory myself, this is just increasing my arrogance, my ego. This whole project of building up the I, the me, the mine, which is the cause of all suffering. There's also the notion that if people keep on praising me, if I receive a lot of praise, it just leads to complacency and pride. I forget the suffering nature of samsara. I forget my own faults when people are praising me all the time. So if I'm a practitioner who wants to uncover my faults and develop good qualities, isn't it better that people slander me sometimes? Isn't it better that people abuse me to remind me not only of their suffering and of the suffering of samsara, but also the fact that I'm not as great as I think I am, and that praise, if it were just praise I was receiving, it would make me very weak spiritually. And it might make me quite arrogant and quite, full of myself, thinking, oh, well, I've arrived, so many people are praising me, my good qualities. I must be really something, So maybe I will write that book. Maybe I will start my own website. Maybe I will begin to promote myself more, whatever it is. Maybe I will talk about my own good qualities more, So this is tricky. This is very tricky if we start doing that, As for cultivating patience, said one of the great teachers of the past, if there is no enemy to inflict harm, there will be no patience. Therefore, when others abuse us and so forth, they should be recognized as the master, the guru, who is bestowing tolerance. So without becoming angry, cultivate this with delight and a feeling of gratitude for their kindness. Thus, think of yourself as the student who is absorbing patience. When others are out of jealousy, and he's quoting Langri Tangpa, this other teacher is quoting this text now. He says, when others out of jealousy abuse and attack me in unjust ways, I should take such unwarranted losses upon myself and offer the victory to others. Even if I see an enraged person frowning with intense wrath at me, who before the eyes of a crowd of many people personally slanders me with assorted vile remarks that strike at my secret shortcomings, may I then, wishing to benefit him, since this affectionate one is cutting through the poisonous tree of my pride, may I cut down his own venomous tree of suffering with the sharp weapon of skillful intelligence and great love. So this person who's abusing me, they're helping reduce my pride. They may also be pointing out some of my secret shortcomings that I don't want to mention to anyone, but this person maybe knows about them. So this person is helping me cut the poisonous tree of my own pride and arrogance, and therefore ego clinging, which are the source of all suffering. So this person is helping me understand and get rid of the cause of my own suffering. So how should I behave? I should help also cut down the venomous tree of his suffering with the sharp weapon of skillful intelligence and great love, not retaliation. Totally different way of thinking. And we have to be careful about it, because if we're not skillful, we can't do it properly. And it can't be applied in big situations, in the sense that if the Ukrainian president now said to Putin that, I take upon myself the defeat, please have the victory, that would be tricky. That would, I think, be tricky. Although in one sense it might lead to less loss of life, but it would lead to more lack of freedom probably for the Ukrainians. If they fight, as they're going to in the east of Ukraine, which is where the battle probably will largely be now, then both sides are going to lose a lot of people. Yeah, there'll be more devastation, more civilians killed, etc., more refugees. What if Zelensky now said, okay, the victory is yours? What would happen? Less people would die, yes, maybe. Russia would, just a sec, Russia would take over eastern Ukraine. Of course, NATO and the West would go bonkers. They would make a lot of noise, but they would still keep on buying Russian oil, as they are now, oil and gas. So yeah, maybe even offering the victory now to avoid further loss of life it would also relieve Putin's anxiety and fear, because he's also acting out of fear and anxiety, isn't he? He is very afraid, I think, of the Western encroachment in Eastern Europe. He's reacting like a cornered animal, which is the most dangerous thing. So anyway, who knows? In many situations, to back off, offer the victory, could be. But as I say, it's very tricky in big situations. One-on-one, it can make more sense. But here it's saying, what is it saying? All these verses are acting as balancing our usual self-cherishing attitude. So here it's saying, don't always try, to have the last word. Don't always try to defeat others in all sorts of ways. Accept the loss, accept the defeat. It can be extremely powerful in taming our negative mind, our egotistic, arrogant mind that always wants to be right, always wants to be the winner, always wants to put the other person down. It's crazy, because we put someone else down, we win a victory, and the other person is unhappy. So how has that helped our bodhisattva activity? The other person is unhappy. That also means they may plan some kind of retaliation in the future, some kind of revenge. at the very least, they will not like us and they will hate us. So how is that good for their minds? Even if I can accept it, how is it good for their mind to harbor anger against me? They're just harming themselves. Bodhisattvas don't want anyone to receive harm. Were you saying something earlier, Anushree?
Yeah, so I was saying.
Can you speak up?
Yeah, so I was saying, I was thinking that what about your self-esteem and notion of self-worth
Yeah, of course.
and self-confidence? Because suppose, let's just say, personally for me, I've become immune to humiliation. Like, because,
Really?
Yeah.
Anushree is immune to humiliation. So she is now one of my real spiritual gurus.
No, so you won't know. So, like, because suppose you have been wounded and hurt over and over again in the past, right? So when someone suffers, that person is very fragile and very sensitive. People who suffer are very, very, like,
Can be.
even a single word can just break them down. But in that case, like, how, and then, so what about a self-confidence, notion of self-worth? How do we strike a balance?
Well, you already said, how did you get over feeling humiliated?
Sorry.
You say you're not humiliated anymore.
No, I was humiliated over and over again for a very long time.
Yeah, this verse is not to be practiced by someone who is suitable to go into counseling for total lack of self-confidence or for other psychological problems. This verse is not for them. As we said, this is a great scope teaching. We have to be careful. But what it is saying that actually the cause of somebody having low self-esteem from Buddhist perspective is complicated, but probably also connected with having too much self-esteem in the future, possibly. And there's some kind of balance going on now. Or some kind of harm has obviously been created by that person to have this current problem of low self-esteem, So long term, this practice would be useful also for that person. But this is talking about the defeat of the ego, not the defeat of the person as such. It's talking about the defeat of ego, which is always the enemy, the wrong kind of ego, the distracted being aspect of ourselves, the arrogance, Because even lack of self-esteem, it can become very self-centered. You're always thinking about, oh, how terrible I am, I'm useless. That's so self-centered. You're not worrying about anybody else. You're just thinking how you are useless. You're just wasting time on that, repeating that again and again. People do it. How is that helping anything? You're not helping yourself. You're not helping anybody else. You're making yourself miserable, which means you can't be of much benefit to other people, except, drinking tea and sharing your miseries with other people who also may be miserable. Or if they're not miserable, they'll feel miserable listening to us. So we're not helping them, Or maybe we're drinking, so then we can get totally drunk, and that won't help us. It will help. Yeah.
I'm Shreya. So this is
Oh,
my first day.
Oh, you've been online. That Shreya who was online with us? Okay, that's another Shreya. Okay.
And I'm sorry, I have to make a move because.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Yes, we do go on and on here.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
I wish I could have stayed a little longer. I was really.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you get our postings on WhatsApp?
Yes.
Good. Yeah. Thank you, Shreya. Thank you. So yeah, the offering to others the victory means we don't always have to put ourselves first. But if we're someone who feels very vulnerable, then we have to be very careful with a verse like this.
Can I ask you something?
Of course.
How much self-esteem is too much self-esteem? How much self-esteem is too much self-esteem?
How much self-esteem is too much? If it borders into, I guess, thinking you are really something great and others, yeah, when we are, judging others and feeling a little proud and, It's a subtle thing. I guess, what the teachings are really saying, if we can be just natural and relaxed, it will help so much. We're uptight, we worry, and so therefore we think too much, and therefore we think too much about the fact that we have low self-esteem. I mean, in one way, it's just building up a total illusion. In one way. Because you can build up through thinking. Through thinking, you can believe to feel you are the worst person in the world, right? Whereas some of your friends itself will tell you you have these good qualities and you helped me in the past. But for the person who is getting involved, habituated to drowning in the thoughts of lack of self-esteem, those statements from their friends won't even get through. They'll keep on thinking, oh, I'm this way, I'm this way. They'll say, yeah, but, So we can actually, through our mind, our thinking, wrong thinking, drive ourselves into the pits of despair, whereas there is no good reason for it. We are just, in one way, on one level, we all have Buddha nature. So in that respect, we are all equal. No one is lower than anyone else in terms of Buddha nature. It's just a question of how much we've awakened that Buddha nature. But we all have it. So a lot of this is just a bad habit of wrong thinking. I mean, samsara is very much that. Thinking, first of all, there's a real solid me who is useless. So first of all, there's no solid being in anybody, according to Buddhism. There's a person, but it's not existing the way we think. It's not as solid and independent as we think. Secondly, there is no being who is totally useless, or who is that way. So in both ways, it's a total waste of time and a bad habit. So in that sense, we shouldn't just feel pity and gentle and soft towards people who have low self-esteem. We should be quite strong with them also and say, look, it's not this way, not just urge them to keep on thinking in that way. Let's urge them to remember that they have the basis of all good qualities, and that actually we could hint to them also they are being a little selfish, just all the time thinking, oh, blah, 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 poor me, poor me, poor me. That is very self-centered, we have to admit. You're not taking you could totally neglect everything going on around you because we're so caught up in, oh, my lack of this, my lack of self-esteem. It's, you see what I'm saying? It just becomes a bad mental habit. And then you really think you do have low self-esteem, and then you do really behave in that way, where you underperform. I shouldn't use the word perform, where you just don't, utilize your good qualities and energies. You've suppressed them by convincing oneself that one is useless. The one lacks this. Why? Because this and this happened to me, or that and that happened to me. Then we have that excuse, Mommy didn't treat me properly, or daddy didn't, or something. Whereas the point is to be awake and present in this moment, which has so much potential. But of course, thoughts, images, the mind drags us back into the past, all the time dragging us back into the past. This is a big problem. Then that becomes an excuse, no? Ye hua isliye main aisa hu. So that is understandable. And the past, of course, has a tremendous effect on us. But the effect it has on us also dependent on our attitude towards the past. Many people become free of their pasts through courageous, spontaneous action. They stop thinking that, oh, I'm just someone whom this happened to, They break free of that. Excuse me?
Class tomorrow?
Huh?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, it's Tuesday.
Tomorrow class.
Class hoga na Tuesday.
Tara Puja.
Tara thoda karenge.
हाँ जी.
Thoda karenge Tara bhi.
It's been long now, 3 years.
Excuse me?
3 years.
Huh? What?
Tara Puja.
3 what?
It's been 3 years since we did Tara Puja.
Ah, yeah, 2.5 saal to ho gaye. We did one the other day a little bit. You weren't here, I think. Anyway, thanks, Bob. Come tomorrow. So, yeah, self-esteem. Any questions from our onliners? We're not giving them a chance today. Thank you for the session. I'll have to peel off. Peel off, that's a good British expression. From Shubham. Okay. Anything, Vishadji?
Abhiji, with respect to the third paragraph here,
The third. Boliye.
all needs may probe into my mind, and as soon as mental and emotional afflictions arise, as they endanger myself and others, I strongly confront. Yeah, so here you are talking about with respect to endangering myself and others, you're saying that it's not just physical, but also verbal and mental, right? The moment mentally we have an affliction, in a sense we are harming ourselves and people around us at a very subtle level, right? But the moment the thought has arisen, the affliction has arisen in our mind, we've already harmed ourselves and others, right?
One might argue that way, unless one is a good meditator, where we just see it as like a illusory kind of thought and we just let it go and it really doesn't have any effect. But if we hold on to it, fixate on it, and begin to feel that it's it's real and identify with it, then it's doing the damage. But if we just see it as a dark cloud, it comes and then it goes, bas ho gaya. No trace, gone without trace. But that's not easy, is it? So yeah, it does have some effect, even if it's there for a split second. You see, it's a flickering thought, yeah. It begins to flicker, it can flicker again and again. If we're not careful, it becomes a big blaze. Was that your question? Your comment?
Yeah. How can we avoid this, Kabirji? How can we
avoid thoughts arising?
How can we so with respect to thoughts coming to our mind, we don't have much of the control, right? We cannot control what thoughts are coming and whether they're good or bad. So we are harming ourselves like moment by moment, day in, day out, right? There's so much harm happening.
Yeah, so much harm happening, yeah. So you remember? Boliye, sorry, I interrupted.
We cannot control it, right? Because we don't
we have to be, yeah, it's hard to control. Remember the example we gave of the grandchild and the grandfather going to the movies, or the grandmother. So the child takes what's happening on the screen seriously and gets very upset, very excited, very jovial, very whatever, fearful, depending on what's happening on the screen, right? Or could even get very angry with the bad person and fall in love with the heroine or the hero, right? But the grandfather or grandmother, they're just looking at the movie and maybe dozing off to sleep in the middle. But anyway, being very wakeful also, but not taking it so seriously. They're not needing to hide under the seat out of fear, or they're not falling totally in love with the heroine, anything like that. Or not feeling tremendous anger towards the villain. बस वो देख रहे मूवी एंजॉय कर रहे हैं, ठीक है, पासिंग शो है, आखिर कोई खास बात नहीं है. You understand? So if we can watch our mind that way, it's just a passing show. It's just a movie, Sometimes as weird or entertaining as Bollywood or Hollywood, but we don't get caught up in it. I think you can see what I'm saying, right? Or not?
Yes, but that can be an excuse, Kabirji, right? Thought arises.
What do you mean excuse?
A thought arises and we are aware of it. Sometimes you're not even aware of it, right? We just
that's what we're saying. Yeah, we need to be aware. Otherwise the thought will come and can take over more and more. So we need to be aware. But then with the awareness, we just see it as part of the passing show. As one teacher said, empty phenomena rolling on. All these thoughts, whatever they are, they're just empty in the sense, no inherent existence, no solidity from their own side. They're just coming, arising, passing, disappearing. So what's to be upset about? What's to grasp onto? There's nothing to grasp onto. But of course, we do grasp. Our habit is to grasp at things, hold it. So we have an anxious thought or a painful thought from the past. We don't just let it go, do we? We kind of squeeze. We want to squeeze something out of it. Squeeze some juice out of it. and maybe develop more thoughts about it. You know?
Yeah, Shantideva's quote about the elephant and the rope.
And the rope.
Yeah, how to tie.
Yeah, he's saying, you know, if we tie our minds with the rope of mindfulness, says Shantideva, doesn't he? Then all fears and anxieties, you know, will disappear, and we'll have all good qualities in the palm of our hand, isn't it? That's the famous quote at the beginning of, I think, Vigilant Introspection. If with mindfulness is rope, the elephant of the mind is tethered all around, our fears will come to nothing, and every virtue will drop into our hands. Well, that kind of idea. We're mindful and don't grasp, you see, don't fixate. As one teacher said, you don't have to take your thoughts seriously. You don't have to believe your thoughts. That's a very good quote. We believe them in that sense. We believe in the anger. We believe in the attachment. We believe in the lack of self-esteem. We believe in the envy, that it's real, it's happening, that I am envious of that person. Well, often it's just a thought. You let go of the thought, what is there? If we don't take the thought seriously, what is there? If someone is not, you know, abuses us, but we're not attached to it, we don't accept the abuse. It just doesn't have any effect on us. That person has only harmed themselves, you know, that kind of idea. We're just cool about it. But this can only happen when we, I think, done more meditation, where we're used to being a bit more calm and clear.
Thought can only arise, negative thought can only arise when we are attached to something, right? Otherwise, why would it arise? The causes are the attachment, right?
Deep causes, but a negative thought can arise just like this without you seeing the cause of it.
Sure, but there is some sort of cause, right? And that cause is probably attachment.
At some point, yes. If you're angry with someone, then there's a cause, and the cause is that you are attached to something which this person then obstructed, or, you know, attached to oneself, and they said something you perceived as a not nice to you. Of course, it all comes back to that. There is a cause. Yeah. What else? We're going to stop soon because, because we've almost had 2 hours and it's to be done later in the day. And very late eating is not suiting me, or anyone perhaps. What else? Briefly, we can do another question. Look at another question.
Customary hand is up, Kabir.
Yeah, bad habit. Quick question. Oh, no, what's that? Anyone? Thank you. I'm very unwell and need to rest. Okay, Yogi ji, sorry. Yogi has left. Yeah, poor Yogi is having a very hard time. I've never met anyone who's had so many problems as Yogi ji, but I won't go into that. Okay, what is it?
So,
Try and make it quick, yeah?
what does K mean when he says?
Huh?
What does K mean when he says?
K for Kabir?
K for Krishnamurti.
Krishnamurti, okay.
Yeah. What does he mean when he says that an innocent mind is one which is
Huh?
an innocent mind?
And
An innocent mind is one which
innocent mind.
innocent mind is one which is incapable of being hurt.
Very good. Well, you've asked this before and you've talked about it before. You want to ask it again for some reason?
I think did we?
Huh?
So can we talk again?
What do you understand by that? That the innocent mind cannot be hurt.
I think what the last 2 verses, especially the last verse which we did, treat me wrongly with abuse and all that.
Yeah.
So that is an innocent mind, right?
It's working towards being an innocent mind. Whether it's become an innocent mind already is hard to say. This is a training. Training suggests that you are training towards some end. This is not so much, I wouldn't say that. His thing is more connected, I think, more with a lot of wisdom and the power of attention. Yeah. But it's connected with what I was saying to just now to Naveen. How can we be hurt by anything if we can't be hurt by anything emotionally, psychologically, we're talking about, not physically. We can't be hurt by anything psychologically if we're not holding on to it as something solid and serious. It won't hurt you. If you keep on thinking about your past pain and how people treated you, and then the hurt will go on and on and on, become unbearable. You know, this hurt, this hurt, this hurt. You know, one could go crazy. People do. If we can let it go, stop thinking about just that, be in the present moment, and not just in the past, because that's what it's about. Falling back into the past in the wrong way. Identifying with past things, which are now a dream. They finished maybe 50, 60 years ago, something finished. We're still holding on to it. Like that monk who was upset that the other monk had carried the woman over the river and said to him, oh, you shouldn't carry the woman over the river. We're not supposed to touch women, you know. The other monk said, I put the woman down a long time ago, but you're still carrying her, you know, mentally. So that's what we're doing. So we need to stop it. I'm not saying it's easy. We have to stop it. That monk was so upset. Oh, this monk, he picked up a woman. Of course, he was very kind. He picked her up because she couldn't cross the river. He didn't do it with lust. He just was helping her. The other monk couldn't let it go. So when we let go, when we can only let go when we stop taking ourselves so seriously, isn't it? We're so uptight. I am hurt. I was this. I wasn't taken care of. This happened to me, etc., etc. In one way, total waste of time. And it's just something we're going back into the past. So we're going back into a total illusion. The past, in a sense, is dead. It's gone. We keep on reviving it. And so therefore we suffer. It's as simple as that and as difficult as that. So how to stay in the present? Attention. We're not attentive. Yeah, we will drift back everywhere. Backwards, sideways, forwards, we'll drift everywhere. Backwards with pain, forwards with anxiety, sideways with distraction. We'll go everywhere. But the present, attention in the present moment. Time and thought. Read more about that. Since you're a teacher at Rishi Valley School, read about what case is about time and thought, and a lot of videos on it. Very good. Then you'll begin to understand more how time and thought, our addiction to time and thinking, is causing us pain, a lot of hurt. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, we'll stop now. Thank you, everybody online. Thank you, everybody here. Dedicate. We should have dedicated earlier when more people were here, but yeah, please dedicate for the happiness and welfare of everyone, for the long life of our teachers, for us to be always connected with such amazing, authentic teachings as the 8 verses of training the mind, and not only be in touch with them, but of course, may we put them into practice in our lives. This is the point. Otherwise, it's just intellectual stimulation. So may we take them to heart, since they have the potential to totally transform our way of living. And see some of you tomorrow. For we'll look at a verse maybe, but also do some compassion Buddha mantra and Tara, white Tara mantra practice for the long lives of our teachers, especially His Holiness Dalai Lama and Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Okay, thank you very much.